The break room felt smaller than usual that Tuesday afternoon. Maya sat in the corner with her lunch, a simple sandwich she'd made at home to save money. Her hand rested on her stomach, a habit she'd developed over the past few weeks. At 5 months pregnant, her belly was starting to show, and there was no hiding it anymore. She could hear them talking. They weren't even trying to be quiet about it. "I still can't believe she came to work like that," whispered one of the women from the marketing department. "No shame at all, right? And she won't tell anyone who the father is. That's so suspicious," another voice chimed in. Maya kept her eyes on her sandwich, pretending she couldn't hear every single word. Her throat felt tight, but she refused to cry. Not here, not in front of them. "My mom always said girls like that make their own problems," the first woman continued. Now look at her, struggling and alone. What did she expect? The words stung more than Maya wanted to admit. She wanted to scream at them, to tell them they didn't know anything about her life or her situation. But what good would that do? They'd already made up their minds about her. The truth was so different from what they imagined. 6 months ago, Maya's life had been completely different. She'd been excited about her new job at Sterling Industries, one of the biggest companies in the city. The annual company gala was her first big event, and she'd been nervous about fitting in with all the important people there. That night, she'd wandered away from the crowded ballroom, overwhelmed by all the fancy dresses and business talk. She'd ended up at the hotel bar, ordering a soda and trying to calm her nerves. That's when she met him, a man sitting alone looking just as uncomfortable with the party as she felt. "Not a fan of these things either?" he'd asked with a warm smile. They'd started talking, and Maya had felt an instant connection. He introduced himself as Alex, and they'd talked for hours about everything and nothing. He was kind and funny, and for the first time in months, Maya felt like herself. He didn't talk about business or try to impress her. He just listened and laughed at her jokes. One thing led to another, and they'd spent the night together. It was unexpected and amazing, and Maya had fallen asleep thinking maybe this was the start of something special. But when she woke up the next morning, he was gone. No note, no number, nothing. Just an empty hotel room and a heart full of confusion. Maya had tried to find him. She'd gone back to the hotel 3 times asking about Alex from the gala, but the staff couldn't help her. She didn't know his last name or where he worked. It was like he'd disappeared into thin air. After 2 months of dead ends, she'd given up. And then she'd discovered she was pregnant. The sandwich in front of her suddenly looked unappetizing. Maya wrapped it back up, saving it for later. Money was tight these days, tighter than it had ever been. Her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. Another reminder about the rent that was already a week late. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She'd figure it out. She always did. "Miss Rivera?" Maya looked up to see her supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. The older woman's expression was stern, disapproving. "Yes, ma'am. I need to speak with you about the Morrison account." "My office, please." Maya gathered her things and followed Mrs. Patterson down the hall, very aware of the eyes watching her as she walked. The whispers started up again the moment she left the break room. In the office, Mrs. Patterson didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Maya, I'm concerned about your performance lately. You've been distracted leaving early for appointments, and frankly, I'm not sure your head is in the game anymore." "I've completed all my assignments on time," Maya said quietly. "My numbers are good. I haven't missed any deadlines. That's not the point. It's about commitment, dedication to the company. With your situation, I have to question whether you're really focused on your career here." Maya felt her face flush. "My situation doesn't affect my work quality, Mrs. Patterson. I've proven that. Nevertheless, I've decided to give the Henderson promotion to Kevin instead. He's shown more initiative lately, and I need someone I can count on for the long term." The words hit Maya like a punch to the gut. She'd worked so hard for that promotion. She needed that raise desperately. Kevin had been with the company for half the time she had and constantly asked her for help with his reports. "I understand," Maya said, even though she didn't. Even though it felt completely unfair. "You can go now." Maya walked back to her desk, her vision blurry with unshed tears. She sat down and stared at her computer screen without really seeing it. The promotion would have meant an extra $800 a month. That money would have covered the crib she needed, the doctor bills that kept piling up, the debt she was drowning in. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother. Maya hesitated before declining the call. She couldn't handle that conversation right now. Not after her mom had told her not to come home anymore, not to embarrass the family with her poor choices. You made your bed. Now lie in it, her mother had said coldly. Those words echoed in Maya's head constantly. At 24 years old, Maya had never felt so alone. The baby's father was gone. Her mother had disowned her. Her coworkers mocked her, and now even her career was being sabotaged. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling a small flutter of movement. The baby was active today. "It's just you and me, little one," she whispered. "But we'll be okay." I promise. The afternoon dragged on. Maya focused on her work, typing reports and analyzing spreadsheets, trying to ignore the comments she overheard whenever someone walked past her desk. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, she was exhausted. She packed up her bag and headed for the elevator, keeping her head down. The walk to the bus stop felt longer than usual. Her feet hurt, her back ached, and she felt the weight of the entire day pressing down on her shoulders. As she stood at the corner waiting for the light to change, a sleek black car slowed down nearby. Maya didn't pay attention to it. Fancy cars were common in this part of the city, and they had nothing to do with her. What she didn't see was the man in the back seat, leaning forward with wide eyes. She didn't see how his hand gripped the leather seat, or how his breath caught in his throat. She didn't notice when he told his driver to stop, or how he watched her cross the street and disappear into the crowd. Maya just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, toward her tiny apartment and another long night of worrying about the future. She had no idea that the man in that car was about to turn her entire world upside down. She had no idea that the father of her baby had just found her, and she definitely had no idea that he was the CEO of the very company where she worked. All she knew was that tomorrow would come, and she'd have to face it all over again. The whispers, the judgment, the struggle to survive. But Maya was stronger than people gave her credit for. She'd survived this long, and she wasn't about to give up now. Alexander Sterling sat frozen in the backseat of his car, his eyes locked on the young woman walking away on the sidewalk. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Sir, is everything all right?" Thomas, his driver of 10 years, glanced back with concern. He'd never seen his boss look so shaken. Alexander couldn't speak for a moment. He just stared as the woman disappeared into the crowd of people leaving work for the day. It was her. After 6 months of searching, of trying to find her, there she was. Walking out of his own building? "Thomas," Alexander finally managed to say, his voice rough. "That woman who just walked past. I need you to find out who she is, but be discreet about it." "Very discreet." "Of course, sir." "Should I follow her?" "No." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm his racing thoughts. "Just find out her name and what department she works in. Use the security desk. They'll have the information." As Thomas made a call to the building security team, Alexander leaned back against the leather seat and closed his eyes. 6 months ago felt like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. He'd been at his own company's annual gala, surrounded by hundreds of people who wanted something from him. Business deals, investments, connections. Everyone had an angle. By 10 o'clock that night, Alexander had been exhausted by all the fake smiles and strategic conversations. He'd slipped away from the ballroom and headed to the hotel bar, desperate for just an hour of peace. That's where he'd met her, a young woman sitting alone, drinking a soda and looking as overwhelmed as he felt. He'd sat down next to her and for the first time in years introduced himself with just his first name. No mention of Sterling Industries or his position as CEO. Just Alex. They'd talked for hours. She was funny and genuine, with dreams of traveling and maybe starting her own business someday. She'd made him laugh in a way he hadn't in months, and when she looked at him, she wasn't seeing dollar signs or opportunities. She was just seeing him. What happened next had been spontaneous and wonderful. They'd spent the night together, and Alexander had fallen asleep feeling more like himself than he had in years. But when his phone rang at 5 in the morning with an emergency from his Tokyo office, he'd had no choice but to leave. His assistant had rushed him to the airport, and by the time Alexander realized he didn't have her number or even her last name, he was already on a plane. He'd tried everything to find her. He'd had his security team review the gala guest list, but there were over 300 people there. Without a last name and only knowing her first name was Maya, it had been impossible. The hotel couldn't help because she'd been at the gala, not a registered guest. He'd even hired a private investigator, but with so little information they'd hit dead end after dead end. After 2 months, Alexander had forced himself to accept that she was gone. He'd thrown himself into work trying to forget the one night he'd felt truly happy in years. And now here she was. In his building, which meant she worked for him, sir? Thomas turned around. Her name is Maya Rivera. She's a junior accountant on the 10th floor. She's been with the company for 8 months. 8 months. Alexander did the quick math in his head. She'd been hired just weeks before the gala. She must have been brand new to the company. And sir, Thomas hesitated. Security mentioned something else. Apparently there's been some workplace issues concerning her recently. What kind of issues? I don't have details, but they suggested you might want to speak with HR. Alexander felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. Thank you, Thomas. Take me home, please. That night, Alexander didn't sleep. He sat in his home office, staring at the limited information his security team had sent over. Maya Rivera's employee file was thin but impressive. Strong performance reviews, perfect attendance until recently, and recommendations from her hiring manager about her analytical skills. But there was something else, too. A note from her supervisor about concerns regarding commitment and personal issues affecting workplace dynamics. The vague language set off alarm bells in Alexander's mind. He pulled up the security footage from that afternoon, watching as Maya walked through the building. He saw the way other employees looked at her, the way she kept her head down, avoided eye contact. And then he saw it. Her hand on her stomach, the slight curve beneath her loose blouse. She was pregnant. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. The timeline matched perfectly. 6 months since the gala. She was showing now, probably 5 or 6 months along. Could it be his? The question consumed him for the rest of the night. By morning, Alexander had made several decisions. First, he needed more information, but he had to be careful. He couldn't just storm into her office and demand answers. That would be an abuse of power, and more importantly, it might scare her away. He called his private investigator, the best in the business. I need you to look into someone for me. Maya Rivera. But I need this done carefully and legally. No invasions of privacy, just public records and observable information. Over the next 3 days, Alexander received reports that made his chest tighten with guilt and anger. Maya's mother had kicked her out shortly after she'd announced her pregnancy. She was living in a rundown studio apartment in a rough neighborhood behind on rent. She'd applied for 3 different second jobs trying to make ends meet. The investigator also uncovered something that made Alexander's blood boil. His own employees had been making Maya's life miserable. There were screenshots of company chat messages mocking her pregnancy. Complaints she'd filed with HR that had been dismissed or ignored. Rumors spreading that she'd tried to trap some man and that's why she was single. What hurt the most was discovering that Maya had tried to find him too. She'd gone back to the hotel multiple times in the weeks after the gala, asking about Alex from the party. But with his security protocols and privacy measures, she'd hit the same walls he had. She'd given up around the time she would have discovered she was pregnant. Alexander spent hours watching security footage, observing how Maya navigated the office. She ate lunch alone. She worked through breaks. She left exactly at 5 o'clock, probably to save on childcare or because she had another job. And through it all, people whispered and pointed. His company was failing her. He was failing her. On the 4th day, Alexander made a bold decision. He instructed his executive assistant to organize a company-wide innovation meeting. Every employee, regardless of level, would be invited to present ideas for improving company operations. It was unusual, but not unheard of, and it would give him a reason to be in the same room as Maya without raising suspicions. When his assistant suggested which employees should present, Alexander made sure Maya's name was on the list. Her performance reviews showed she'd submitted several cost-saving proposals that her supervisor had taken credit for. It was time those ideas got the recognition they deserved. Make sure everyone knows this is mandatory, Alexander said, and I want all senior leadership there. This is important, his assistant nodded, not questioning the sudden initiative. After all, Alexander was known for his unexpected strategies. As the meeting date approached, Alexander found himself nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first board presentation years ago. He didn't know what would happen when Maya saw him. Would she recognize him? Would she be angry that he'd disappeared? Would she tell him about the baby? More importantly, how would she react when she discovered that Alex from the bar was actually Alexander Sterling, the CEO of the company where she worked? The night before the meeting, Alexander stood in his penthouse apartment looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Maya was probably worried about bills and doctor appointments and all the things she shouldn't have to face alone. If the baby was his, and his gut told him it was, then he'd missed 6 months of the pregnancy, 6 months of appointments and ultrasounds and moments he could never get back. Maya had been struggling, judged and mocked by people who should have supported her, while he'd been completely oblivious. He thought about his own childhood, growing up with a father who was always too busy for him. Alexander had promised himself he'd never be that kind of man. Yet here he was, potentially about to discover he was going to be a father, and he'd been absent for half the pregnancy. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, Maya would walk into that conference room and see him. And depending on how that conversation went, both their lives would never be the same. Alexander just hoped he could find the right words. He hoped she'd give him a chance to explain, to be there for her and the baby. He hoped it wasn't too late to make things right. The city lights twinkled below him, indifferent to his worries. Somewhere out there, Maya was probably lying awake too, preparing for a presentation she didn't know would reunite her with the father of her child. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough, and yet Alexander dreaded it with every fiber of his being. Maya's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood outside the main conference room, clutching her laptop like it was a life raft. Through the glass doors, she could see the room filling up with executives in expensive suits. "This had to be some kind of mistake. You okay?" asked Brian from accounting, walking past with his own laptop. "Yeah, just nervous," Maya managed to say. "Do you know why they invited junior staff to this meeting?" "It seems weird," Brian shrugged. "Who knows? Maybe the CEO wants to seem more in touch with regular employees. You know how these big bosses are." Maya had never even seen the CEO in person. Alexander Sterling was practically a myth in the building. People whispered about him like he was some kind of legend. Brilliant, ruthless, impossibly wealthy. He usually worked from the executive floor, far above where people like Maya spent their days. When the invitation to present had arrived in her email 3 days ago, Maya had been sure it was a prank. Or worse, another setup to humiliate her. But her supervisor had confirmed it was real, though Mrs. Patterson had looked just as confused and annoyed as Maya felt. "Just don't embarrass the department," Mrs. Patterson had warned her coldly. Now, standing outside the conference room, Maya wondered if this was how they were going to fire her. Make her present in front of everyone and then let her go as an example. Her stomach churned with anxiety, and the baby kicked as if sensing her stress. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, placing a hand on her belly. "We'll get through this." The doors opened and someone called her name. Maya took a deep breath and walked inside. The conference room was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city skyline. At least 40 people filled the chairs around the long table and lined up against the walls. Maya recognized some faces from different departments, all of them staring at her with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment. "Ms. Rivera, you'll be presenting third," said a woman with a tablet, probably someone's assistant. "Please take a seat for now." Maya found an empty chair near the back and tried to make herself invisible. She watched as the first presenter, a confident man from the marketing department, talked about social media strategies. Then came a woman from IT discussing security upgrades. "Next we have Maya Rivera from accounting," the assistant announced. Maya stood up, her legs feeling like jelly. She made her way to the front of the room, setting up her laptop to connect to the projector. Her presentation was about cost-saving measures she'd identified in the company's expense reports. Small things that added up to significant savings over time. She clicked to her first slide and opened her mouth to speak. That's when the door at the far end of the conference room opened. A man walked in and the entire energy of the room shifted. People straightened in their chairs. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Maya watched as everyone's attention snapped to the newcomer. He was tall, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, dark hair, strong jawline, and an air of authority that was unmistakable. This had to be him. The CEO, Maya's mouth went dry as she prepared to start her presentation, but then the man looked up. Their eyes met across the room. The world seemed to stop spinning. No, it couldn't be. But it was. Alex. The man from the hotel bar. The man she'd searched for desperately. The father of her baby. Except he wasn't Alex, he was Alexander Sterling. The CEO. Her boss's boss's boss. The laptop remote slipped from Maya's hand and clattered to the floor. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The room started to spin and she gripped the podium to keep from falling. She watched as recognition flooded his face too. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly, and he stopped walking, frozen in the doorway. "Ms. Rivera?" someone asked. "Are you all right?" Maya couldn't answer. Her vision was getting blurry around the edges. This couldn't be happening. The man she'd been looking for, the man who'd disappeared without a trace, was the CEO of Sterling Industries. He'd lied to her. He'd used a fake name. And now she was standing in front of him and dozens of employees pregnant with his child, while everyone stared at her like she was losing her mind. I need a moment," Maya whispered, and then she ran. She didn't care about the presentation or her job or what anyone thought. She just needed to get out of that room. Her heels clicked rapidly against the marble floor as she rushed down the hallway, not even knowing where she was going. Behind her, she heard footsteps and a voice calling her name. His voice. "Maya, wait, please." She pushed through a door into an empty hallway near the service elevators. Her back hit the wall and she pressed her hands against it, trying to steady herself. Her heart was racing so fast it hurt. Alexander appeared around the corner, slightly out of breath. He'd followed her. "Of course he had. Maya," he said softly, holding up his hands like he was approaching a frightened animal. "Please just let me explain." "Explain what?" Maya's voice came out sharper than she intended. "Explain how you lied about your name? How you disappeared without a word? How you're the CEO and I've been working here for months without you saying anything?" "I didn't lie," Alexander said, and there was pain in his eyes. "Alex is what my friends call me. What I wanted to be called that night. I was tired of being Alexander Sterling. Tired of people only seeing the company and the money. I just wanted to be normal for one evening." "Well, congratulations," Maya said, tears streaming down her face now. "You got your normal evening and I got to spend the last 6 months being mocked and judged and struggling alone." "I looked for you," Alexander said, stepping closer. "For weeks, Maya. I went back to the hotel. I had people searching through the guest lists, but I only knew your first name, and you weren't registered at the hotel. I tried everything." Maya laughed bitterly. "And I looked for you too. I went back 3 times asking about Alex from the gala, but you'd vanished like some kind of ghost. I'm sorry." His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I had an emergency in Tokyo that morning. My assistant rushed me to the airport, and by the time I realized I had no way to contact you, I was already on a plane. I should have left a note. I should have gotten your number. I should have done 100 things differently." They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of 6 months of missing each other hanging between them. "Why didn't you tell me?" Maya asked quietly, her hand moving to her stomach. "When you saw me in the building, why didn't you say something?" "Because I needed to be sure," Alexander said, his eyes dropping to where her hand rested. "And because I didn't want to use my position to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. I needed to understand what happened first." "What happened," Maya said slowly, "is that I got pregnant, and I had no way to tell you. And then my mom kicked me out, and people at work treated me like garbage, and I've been barely surviving for months. That's what happened." Alexander's face went pale. "Your mother kicked you out?" "The day I told her. She said I was an embarrassment to the family." Maya wiped her tears roughly. "But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're the CEO of this company, and I'm just a junior accountant, and this whole situation is completely impossible." "Is it mine?" Alexander asked quietly. "The baby?" Maya met his eyes. Even now, even with all the anger and confusion and pain, she couldn't lie to him. "Yes," she whispered. "You're the only person I've been with in over a year. The baby is yours." She watched as Alexander's carefully controlled expression crumbled. His eyes filled with tears and he pressed a hand to his mouth. For a moment, he looked nothing like the powerful CEO everyone feared. He just looked like a man who'd been given news that changed everything. "I'm going to be a father," he said, more to himself than to her. "You don't have to be involved," Maya said quickly. "I know this is complicated with the company and your position. I'm not asking you for anything. I just wanted you to know the truth, and now you do. Not asking for anything. Alexander looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Maya, you're carrying my child. You've been going through this alone for months. You've been struggling and hurting while I had no idea. How could you think I wouldn't want to be involved? Because people like you don't end up with people like me, Maya said, her voice barely audible. Because this was supposed to be one night, not a lifetime commitment. Because I know how the world works? Then let me show you that you're wrong, Alexander said, taking another step closer. I don't know what happens next. I don't have all the answers, but I know I want to be here for you and our baby. If you'll let me, at whatever pace you're comfortable with. Maya wanted to believe him. She wanted to so badly it hurt, but she'd been let down too many times, hurt too deeply. Everyone in that conference room just saw me run out, she said. They're going to talk. They probably already are talking. Alexander's expression hardened. Let them talk. Actually, no. I'm going to make sure they stop talking. About you, about this situation, about everything. That ends today. You can't just fix this with your money and power, Maya said. Maybe not, Alexander agreed. But I can try. And more importantly, I can be here. For the appointments, for whatever you need. I missed 6 months already. I don't want to miss any more. Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same man from the hotel bar. Underneath the expensive suit and the CEO title, Alex was still there. The man who'd made her laugh, who'd listened to her dreams, who'd made her feel special for one perfect night. This is going to be complicated, she said. I know. People are going to judge us. I know. And I'm still angry at you for disappearing. I know, Alexander said gently. And you have every right to be. But please, Maya, give me a chance to make this right. Give me a chance to be the father our baby deserves. Maya closed her eyes, one hand on her belly where their baby was growing. This wasn't how she'd imagined things would go. But life rarely went according to plan. Okay, she whispered. But we take this slow, and you don't get to use your position to control anything. We figure this out as equals or not at all. Equals, Alexander agreed immediately. I promise. Neither of them knew that half the company was currently gossiping about what they'd just witnessed. Neither of them knew how their lives were about to change. But in that quiet hallway, they'd taken the first step toward something unexpected. They'd found each other again. And this time, neither of them was going to let go. The next morning, Maya woke up to 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Word had spread fast. By the time she'd left work yesterday, everyone knew something had happened between her and the CEO. The rumors were already spinning out of control. She sat on her small bed, staring at her phone, reading the messages from coworkers she barely knew. Some were curious, asking what happened. Others were cruel, saying she'd probably trapped the CEO on purpose. A few expressed fake concern that was obviously just fishing for gossip. Maya deleted them all without responding. Her phone rang again. This time it was Alexander. She'd saved his number last night after they'd exchanged contact information in that quiet hallway. Hello? She answered, her voice still rough from sleep. Maya, I need you to stay home today, Alexander said without preamble. Don't come into the office. Maya sat up straighter, alarm shooting through her. Are you firing me? Because if this is about yesterday, no, God, no, Alexander interrupted quickly. I'm calling an emergency company meeting this morning. I'm going to address what happened and make some things very clear to everyone, but I don't want you there for it. I don't want you to have to face those people while I'm doing this. What are you going to tell them? Maya asked nervously. The truth, or at least the parts that matter. That you and I have a personal relationship that started before you worked here, and that anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me directly. Maya's stomach twisted with anxiety. Alexander, you don't have to do this. It'll just make things worse. It's already worse, Maya. I spent half of last night reading through incident reports and complaint logs. Do you know how many times you've reported harassment to HR in the past 3 months? Maya was quiet. She'd filed 5 complaints, none of which had led to anything changing. 7 times, Alexander continued, his voice tight with anger. 7 different incidents of workplace harassment that were either ignored or dismissed as personality conflicts. That ends today. I'm not letting anyone treat you like that anymore. People will say I'm getting special treatment because of the baby, Maya said softly. Then they'll be asked to leave. I'm serious about this, Maya. Sterling Industries is supposed to be better than this. We have policies against harassment for a reason, and they're going to be enforced, starting now. After they hung up, Maya spent the morning pacing her small apartment. She tried to distract herself with television, then with cleaning, but nothing worked. She kept imagining what was happening at the office, what Alexander was saying, how people were reacting. At Sterling Industries, the main auditorium was packed. Every employee had been summoned for the mandatory meeting, and the room buzzed with speculation. People whispered about Maya and the CEO, creating stories out of the few facts they had. Alexander stood backstage, preparing himself. His head of HR, Diane Chen, stood beside him, looking nervous. "Sir, are you sure about this approach?" Diane asked. "Perhaps we could handle this more quietly." "Quietly?" Alexander turned to her with cold eyes. "The way you handled Maya Rivera's harassment complaints quietly, by filing them away and doing nothing?" Diane paled. "Sir, those complaints were investigated, were they? Because I've read every single one and I don't see any evidence of real investigation. I see dismissals and excuses." Alexander's voice was sharp. "We'll discuss your department's failures in detail later. Right now I have a company to address." He walked onto the stage and the auditorium fell silent instantly. Alexander rarely addressed the entire company at once. When he did, it usually meant something major was happening. "Good morning," Alexander began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I'm going to keep this brief because I know you all have work to do. I called this meeting to address a situation that has come to my attention and to make some things absolutely clear about the culture of this company." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Somewhere in that crowd were the people who had made Maya's life miserable. Yesterday, during our innovation presentations, something happened that many of you witnessed. Maya Rivera, one of our junior accountants, had a difficult moment during her presentation. What you don't know is why. The room was absolutely silent now. Everyone was leaning forward, listening intently. Maya and I have a personal relationship that began before she was employed here. Due to circumstances beyond both our control, we lost contact for several months. Yesterday was the first time we'd seen each other since then, and as you can imagine, it was a shock for both of us. Alexander took a breath before continuing. "What concerns me more than our personal situation is what I've learned about how Maya has been treated during her time at this company. She's been subjected to gossip, harassment, and discrimination because of her pregnancy. She's filed multiple complaints that were ignored or dismissed. That is unacceptable." He could see people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "Good. They should be uncomfortable. Some of you may be wondering why I'm addressing this so publicly. It's simple. Harassment thrives in silence and secrecy. It continues when people think no one is watching, or that there will be no consequences. So I'm making it very clear in front of all of you that those days are over." Alexander's voice grew harder. "Effective immediately, anyone found to have participated in harassing Maya or any other employee will face termination. No warnings, no second chances. We have clear policies against workplace harassment, and they will be enforced without exception." He pulled out a piece of paper. "I have here a list of individuals who will be meeting with HR and legal today. If your name is called, you are to report to the HR department immediately following this meeting. Jennifer Walsh, Kevin Patterson, Diana Moore, Robert Chen." Alexander read off 12 names total. People in the audience gasped as they recognized the names. These weren't just junior employees. Some were supervisors and mid-level managers. "Additionally," Alexander continued, "our entire HR department will be undergoing a complete review. We clearly have failed in our responsibility to protect our employees, and that will change." He looked directly at Mrs. Patterson, Maya's supervisor, who was sitting in the third row looking pale. "I also want to address the issue of promotions and opportunities. It has come to my attention that qualified employees have been passed over for advancement due to personal bias rather than merit. This practice ends now. Every promotion, every opportunity will be based solely on performance and qualifications. Nothing else." Alexander folded his hands. "I know some of you are curious about my relationship with Maya. That's natural. But here's what you need to understand. Our personal life is exactly that. Personal. It has nothing to do with her work performance or her position in this company. Maya was hired based on her qualifications before I knew she worked here. She has performed her job excellently despite facing obstacles that never should have existed." He paused, making eye contact with various people in the audience. And for those of you who might think Maya is receiving special treatment, let me be clear. The only special treatment she'll receive is the same respect and professional courtesy that every employee in this company deserves and has always deserved. That's not special treatment, that's basic human decency. The auditorium remained silent, everyone processing what they'd just heard. One more thing, Alexander said, his voice softer now. I'm going to be a father. Maya and I are expecting a child. This wasn't planned and it's complicated, but it's also the best news I've received in a very long time. I'm sharing this because I don't want Maya to have to hide or feel ashamed. She's done nothing wrong. Neither have I. And our child deserves to come into a world where their parents don't have to pretend they don't know each other. He took a final look around the room. If anyone has a problem with this situation, with our policies, or with treating every employee with dignity and respect, my door is open. Come talk to me directly. But if you can't do that, if you can't work in an environment that values all its people, then perhaps Sterling Industries isn't the right place for you. Thank you. You're dismissed. Alexander left the stage to stunned silence. As he walked backstage, he pulled out his phone and called Maya. It's done, he said when she answered. How are you feeling? Terrified, Maya admitted. But also relieved, I think. Thank you for doing that. You don't need to thank me. I should have done it the moment I found out what was happening. Alexander paused. Are you free this afternoon? I'd like to take you to your next doctor's appointment. If you're comfortable with that. Maya was quiet for a moment. It's at 3 o'clock. I'll pick you up at 2:30. And Maya, we're going to figure this out, one day at a time. After they hung up, Maya sat by her window, watching the city below. For the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. She didn't know what the future held, or how this complicated situation would work out. But Alexander had stood up for her in front of hundreds of people. He'd put his reputation on the line to protect her and their baby. Maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I meant what I said. I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere. Maya placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. Did you hear that, little one? She whispered. Your daddy is going to be around after all. She smiled for the first time in days. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be challenges and judgment and difficult conversations. But they'd face them together, and that made all the difference. 3 months had passed since that company meeting, and Maya's life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. She stood in the nursery of her new apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with actual sunlight streaming through the windows. The walls were painted a soft yellow and a white crib sat in the corner, already assembled and waiting. Maya ran her hand along the railing, still not quite believing this was real. What do you think? Alexander asked from the doorway. He'd been carrying in boxes of baby supplies all morning, insisting on doing most of the heavy lifting himself. It's perfect, Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. I never thought I'd have something like this for her. Her. They'd found out 2 weeks ago that they were having a daughter. Alexander had cried in the doctor's office, holding Maya's hand and staring at the ultrasound screen like it held all the secrets of the universe. You deserve this, Alexander said, walking over to stand beside her. Both of you do. Things between them had been slow and careful, just as Maya had insisted. Alexander hadn't tried to rush anything or use his money to solve every problem. Instead, he'd shown up, to every doctor's appointment, sitting in the waiting room with his calendar cleared for the day, to every late-night craving run, bringing her pickles and ice cream at 2 in the morning without complaint, to the childbirth classes, where he was the only CEO learning breathing techniques alongside first-time moms and nervous dads. He'd helped her move from that tiny studio into this apartment, but he'd been careful to let her make every decision. The location, the furniture, the colors. He offered suggestions but never pushed. And most importantly, he had his own place. He hadn't assumed they'd live together just because they were having a baby. I'm respecting your pace, he'd told her when she asked why he wasn't moving in. When and if you want me here full-time, you'll tell me. Until then, I'm happy to be whatever you need me to be. The office situation had improved dramatically too. After that meeting, 12 employees had been let go, including Mrs. Patterson. The entire HR department had been restructured. Maya had been given the promotion that should have been hers months ago, along with a raise that had nothing to do with Alexander, and everything to do with the cost-saving proposals she'd presented. People treated her differently now, but not in the way she'd feared. There was respect instead of mockery. Colleagues actually talked to her instead of about her. And if anyone had a problem with her relationship with Alexander, they were smart enough to keep it to themselves. "I have something for you," Alexander said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Maya's heart jumped. "Alexander, if that's what I think it is." "It's not a ring," he said quickly, opening the box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a baby's footprint. "I know we're not there yet, but I wanted you to have something to remember that we're in this together." Maya felt tears prick her eyes as he fastened the bracelet around her wrist. These days, everything made her cry. Commercials, songs on the radio, the way Alexander looked at her ultrasound pictures like they were priceless art. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For being here, for being patient, for not trying to control everything." "Thank you for giving me a chance," Alexander replied. "I know I don't deserve it after disappearing that morning, but I promise you, Maya, I'm not going anywhere this time." Her phone rang, interrupting the moment. Maya glanced at the screen and felt her stomach tighten. It was her mother. They hadn't spoken since the day her mom had kicked her out. But 3 days ago, Maya had sent a simple text. "I'm having a girl. Due in 3 months. Thought you should know." She hadn't expected a response. But now her mother was calling. "You should answer it," Alexander said gently, reading the conflict on her face. Maya took a deep breath and accepted the call. "Hello? Maya?" Her mother's voice was stiff, formal. "I received your message." Yes, there was a long pause. Maya could hear her mother breathing on the other end. Could picture her standing in their family kitchen, struggling with whatever she'd called to say. "Your father and I would like to see you," her mother finally said. "To talk." Maya's hand instinctively went to her belly. Her daughter kicked as if offering encouragement. "Okay, when? This Sunday? For dinner?" "I'll be there," Maya said. "But Mom, I'm bringing someone with me. The baby's father. He's part of my life now, and if you want to be in my life, you need to accept that." Another pause. "The father is involved?" "Very involved," Maya confirmed, looking at Alexander, who was watching her with concern. "He's a good man. He'll see." After they hung up, Maya leaned against Alexander's chest, letting him wrap his arms around her. "That was terrifying," she admitted. "You were brave," he said, kissing the top of her head. "And I'll be right there with you on Sunday. Whatever happens." Sunday came faster than Maya would have liked. She stood on her parents' doorstep, Alexander beside her, feeling like she was 16 again instead of 24. The door opened before she could knock. Her father stood there, older than she remembered, his hair grayer. He looked at Maya, then at her very pregnant belly, and his eyes filled with tears. "Baby girl," he said, his voice breaking. "I've missed you so much." Maya started crying too, and then she was in her father's arms, holding him tight. "I missed you too, Dad." Her mother appeared behind him, watching the reunion with careful eyes. When Maya and her father finally pulled apart, her mother stepped forward. "Come in," she said quietly. "Both of you." Dinner was awkward at first. Maya's parents kept staring at Alexander like they couldn't quite believe their daughter was with someone who wore suits that cost more than their mortgage payment. But Alexander was patient and respectful, answering their questions honestly. "I made mistakes," he told them. "I disappeared when Maya needed me most. I didn't know about the baby, but that doesn't excuse my absence. I'm trying to make up for that now, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure your daughter and granddaughter have everything they need." Maya's mother was quiet for a long time after that. Finally, she looked at Maya. "I was wrong," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "When you told me you were pregnant, I was angry and ashamed. I thought about what people would say, what the family would think. I didn't think about you, about what you needed." "Mom, let me finish," her mother interrupted gently. "These past months, I've had time to think. Your aunt told me I was being foolish, throwing away my relationship with my only daughter over pride. She was right. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I hope you'll let me try to be part of your life again, and part of my granddaughter's life." Maya reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "I'd like that," she said. "She needs her grandparents." The evening ended with Maya's parents insisting on seeing the nursery photos on her phone and her father slipping a check into Alexander's hand for the baby's college fund. Alexander tried to refuse, but Maya's father was insistent. "Let me do this," he said. Let me be a grandfather. On the drive home, Maya watched the city lights pass by, feeling more at peace than she had in months. Alexander held her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "That went well," he said. "Better than I expected," Maya agreed. Then she turned to him. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. Do you ever regret it? Meeting me that night at the bar? Everything that's happened since?" Alexander pulled the car over, turning to face her fully. "Maya, that night was the best thing that ever happened to me. It brought me you and our daughter. It made me realize what actually matters in life. So no, I don't regret it, not for a single second." He reached out and placed his hand on her belly, his face softening when the baby kicked against his palm. "I love her already," he said quietly. "And I'm falling in love with you too. I know it's complicated and messy and not how either of us planned, but it's real and it's ours, and I wouldn't change it for anything." Maya felt her heart swell. She'd been guarding herself, protecting her feelings, afraid to admit how much she cared for him. But watching him now, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, she couldn't hold back anymore. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling for you that night at the bar, and I never really stopped." Alexander kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a promise of everything they could become. 3 months later, when their daughter Sophie was born, both families were in the waiting room. Alexander was by Maya's side through every moment, crying when he first held his tiny daughter, whispering promises to her about the life they'd build together. A year after that, Alexander proposed properly, in the same hotel bar where they'd first met. Maya said yes without hesitation, because by then they weren't just co-parents anymore. They were partners, best friends, and deeply in love. The office gossips had finally found something new to talk about. But Maya didn't care. She had everything she needed: a daughter who was the light of her life, a man who'd proven his love through actions rather than words, and a family that had learned what really mattered. Her story hadn't started the way fairy tales do. There was no glass slipper or enchanted castle. Just two people finding each other in the messiness of real life, losing each other and then fighting their way back together. And somehow, that made it even better. Because the best love stories aren't the ones that start perfectly. They're the ones where people choose each other again and again, despite the obstacles and the doubts and the fear. Maya had been mocked for being a single mother. She'd been judged and dismissed and made to feel worthless, but she'd survived it all, and on the other side, she found something more valuable than any fairy tale ending. She found herself, she found her strength, and she found a love that was real, complicated, and absolutely worth fighting for. As she danced with Alexander at their small wedding ceremony, Sophie sleeping peacefully in her grandmother's arms nearby, Maya smiled. Life had taken her on an unexpected journey, but she'd ended up exactly where she was meant to be, and that was the real happy ending.